Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to MOCCA webinar. My name is Jocelyn King. I'll be moderating today, and I'm the president of MOCCA, so welcome. And I am so excited about this webinar because I've been watching trends in the rise of revenue operations and the rise of demand orchestration. And we've got two great leaders here today who are really doing cutting-edge work in demand strategy and orchestration. So I'd like to introduce Jeff Siegel, who's Group Manager of Demand Strategy and Orchestration at Box, the leading content management company. So welcome, Jeff.
Hi, Jocelyn. Hi, everybody.
Great. And also, I'd really like to introduce Kate Athmer. She is the Director of Demand Orchestration at Integrate, the leader in demand orchestration platforms. So Kate has the unique position of being able to drink her own champagne, as we like to say at MOCCA, and not only use the product, but be the best practice example for all of us in the industry following. And so it's wonderful to have Kate here, and she also is going to share insights from what they're doing inside Integrate. So welcome, Kate.
Thanks, Jocelyn. I'm happy to be here.
Terrific. So we're going to go ahead and get started. And also, if you're tweeting during this event, we're using the hashtag MarketingOps for anything you want to put out about MOCCA and the insights learned today. So feel free to use hashtag MarketingOps. So briefly, for those of you who are new to MOCCA or haven't been with MOCCA for a while, I'll just briefly tell you a little bit about MOCCA. We are the professional organization that is focused on, sorry, I'm just going back one slide, that is focused on operational excellence in marketing. So we started for marketing operations practitioners, and as operational excellence in marketing has grown, including analytics, measurement, strategic planning, anything to do with the science of marketing, we have grown our focus in MOCCA, and we have roughly 7,000 members, a little 7,500 members in roughly 4,000 companies, from startups to large organizations. So we're really love to engage everyone, and we're very happy to have everybody joining us on this webinar. Sorry, I'm just making sure I'm seeing the audience. So let's talk about today's discussion. So what we're doing today is a dive into the state of marketing operations and this trend towards revenue marketing, which everyone's talking about and all the conferences are, but we wanted to get specifically past the hype and get under the hood, looking at the new paradigms and what is really needed of marketing operations practitioners in order to truly become a revenue marketing organization and drive revenue operations, and the implication to Martech and operations, and the need to bring orchestration. So I'm really happy to have this conversation, and I'm going to turn it over to Jeff and Kate to add a little more to this topic and take us through their experiences and best practices and walk you through their case study.
Thanks, Jocelyn. I guess I'll take it away from here. Thank you very much to MOCCA, first of all, for having us. I know it's one of the more valuable organizations that I'm a part of in terms of educational content and just being able to brainstorm with other members of the organization. So it's really an honor to contribute to that today. My plan is to quickly set the table and let Jeff do really most of the talking, because he's lived and breathed this transition to revenue marketing at an enterprise level, and I know that's what everyone came to hear. So we'll start with today's discussion, diving deep into the state of marketing operations, which evolved pretty similar to kind of how the MOCCA organization evolved. We started with a little bit of science and a little bit of tech, and have grown into a very operations-focused marketing organization. So revenue marketing is one of those terms that's being thrown out a lot lately, and more lately, and it's really becoming an imperative at the C-level. And Martech is a big enabler for this movement, because now we have the capability of measuring things We have the capability of automating processes and just doing more than we could before. And it's important as we go through this transition that we're not just adding tech and we're not just relying on technology to advance the organization, but that we're bringing really an orchestration focus to the marketing organization. And so what we're going to go into to kind of demonstrate this is how Jeff and his team at Box really move the needle on revenue acceleration. And I think it's helpful if Jeff starts by setting the table of kind of where he is today, where he sits in the organization, and how he got here. So, Jeff, why don't you fill us in on that?
Thanks, Kate. Yeah, first of all, just let me say I've always been a big fan of Integrate's blog and kind of the vision that they've set forward for B2B marketing, so really happy to be here today with you, Kate. So this is the part, I guess, where I tell you all why I'm here today and why you should listen to the next 30 minutes or so as we go through this presentation. At Box, I'm the Group Manager of Demand Strategy and Orchestration. It's kind of an odd title, but really my role is sort of an interesting one. I sit at the intersection of performance marketing and operations, kind of acting as a strategic overlay within our overall strategy and ops function. And this sort of has always given me a unique view as I've sort of worked to help Box along this revenue marketing journey or evolution. At Box for the past 2 years or so, we've really been on a journey to truly build out a performance-oriented GTM partner organization that really could help Box build revenue across all of its audiences and across the entire customer journey, not just focused on building a brand or just building pipeline, but really starting to work alongside all of our GTM partners to really hit that top line of the business. So today what I'm going to do is share some of my insights, some of the ideas and basic frameworks that we've used to kind of help drive this journey, and hopefully it'll give you some ideas to help you adopt a similar mindset in your orgs.
So what do we mean by revenue marketing? Let's start there. The role of the CMO has definitely changed, and I think in many cases, and I think many people on this call would agree, it could potentially be called the hardest role in the C-suite. Tech made things measurable in areas of marketing where it previously wasn't, and I think now that we can measure the impact of marketing, we're kind of expected to contribute and help out throughout the whole funnel. But of course, you know, we're not getting more resources to do so. But one of the things that we think about and one of the things we talk about a lot is pipeline and generating pipeline through marketing. But when it comes down to it, revenue only happens when a deal closes. So we're looking down the funnel and operating in a world where pipeline and accelerating pipeline is still an important role of marketing, but we're looking down the funnel to see where we can further contribute, what we can do to help get deals across the line faster so that we can actually realize revenue marketing, realize our revenue contributions that we've committed to. So this means working to align channels, tools, data, and know-how, and we call this orchestration. So orchestration of all of the aspects of marketing. So where did we come from? We're making progress. Performance marketing is a real thing, and most organizations are at least talking about revenue impact. We've connected some of our systems, so marketing automation, CRM, websites, that's kind of table stakes, but we also have some pieces that aren't connected. We've embraced content marketing. We've mastered inbound. We're proving impact through data and making adjustments based on data. And we have built the bridge to sales. We get the message, things like ABM, focus on priority leads. If marketing is working hand in hand with sales, we just know that that works better. But it is a journey, and marketing needs to continuously improve itself to efficiently and effectively use the tech for all it's worth. So if we buy something, make sure it's delivering on the functionality that you bought, delivering the return you expect, and really utilizing its full set of capabilities. We also need to deliver data and insights with speed and accuracy, fast enough to enable action. So not just looking at vanity metrics, but really able to dig in and make changes to our strategy based on what we're seeing in the data. We need to work to connect critical processes or even create critical processes within the marketing organization in all areas of it, not just in marketing operations. And then ensure that marketing is working beyond marketing as well across the revenue engines to drive impact. So how can marketing work better with sales, with customer success, and even with the product team? So one thing I want to mention before we keep going is that it is a journey, and not everyone is starting at the same place. Not everyone is looking for the same results. So this is a kind of a helpful graph we put together for some of our customers. You might need to get some really critical fundamentals down before you can be on the path toward demand orchestration or revenue acceleration. So take an honest assessment of where you currently are, what are the key things your organization needs to focus on, and keep that in mind as we go through the rest of this conversation. So let's start with talking tech stacks. Actually, let's stop talking about tech stacks. At least let's stop talking about them like this. It's not about quantity. It's time to stop talking about stacks, waving our tech around like trophies, implementing more, implementing one-off point solutions. It's about making it really all work together to deliver the business results that our organization needs. You can't just, tech is so personalized to the organization that some organizations simply don't need as much or don't need the same pieces. So Jeff, I know you actually have a really strong opinion on this, so I want to hand it over to you to talk about this.
Okay, thanks. I think you definitely said it right. You know, I think too often nowadays we wind up too focused on our stacks. And the reality is it's so easy to get lost in the onslaught of cool new tech out there and just trying to add more to your Martech and try to show how much more you can do. You know, any conference you go to now, you go into one of the exhibit halls, and there's just so much out there now. There's just so many cool and innovative solutions that it's really easy for us to kind of get lost in the excitement of it all. But there really is a handful of drawbacks to this sort of what we're calling kind of a Martech madness. One thing is it really does impact our focus as operation professionals or strategic leaders. You know, as soon as we start getting focused more and more on KPIs around projects completed or new tech onboarded, we lose sight to really assessing ourselves on, does this make sense? Does our stack actually make a difference? Are we fully delivering on the promise of each investment? Oftentimes it also leads to half implementations. We rush to get it in and get it done and check off that we've got this new cool piece of tech and add a new logo on our slides. So we can also move on to the next big piece of the tech stack or the next project. And then when it doesn't really work, we then go blame the tech and try to find something new to replace it. You know, and part of that is also because we've lost sight of the sustain function oftentimes with this kind of Martech fury, which is really that we need to actually take time to work on our tech and the implementation of that tech, and then constantly continuing to maintain the tech and ensuring that our implementation is right, our teams are properly trained, the data in there is clean and remains clean and accessible, and that ultimately our marketers are truly empowered by what we've already brought in. If we lose sight of this too much and get too focused on the frenzy of new tech and building out a bigger stack and, you know, just throwing more and more pieces on top of it, we ultimately wind up with a system that actually hurts our marketers. And not just our marketers, but the rest of our GTM systems as we start to move into a world of revenue marketing. And suddenly bad data pops up everywhere. Or do I use this system, or I need to go into this portal and then that portal to get the data that I need to pull it all together to actually do my job. And so we actually can wind up hurting the mission more so than helping it the moment that we get too frenzied with adding too much into our stack and spending less time focusing on the actual effectiveness of our stack. And look, it's not that we don't mean well, but we all can fall victim to kind of the allure of the next big shiny thing and, you know, really thinking that we've delivered value before we stop and really assess long term what that value is or what the value can be if we continue to maintain our focus on the pieces we do have. And so, And so right after talking about that, here's our big tech stack slide, right? And really actually what we're trying to do now is be a little edgy and cool and calling it more of a tech fabric. And the real point there is that we've really tried to focus more and more on taking the tech that we have and integrating it and making it really weave together. And where we do need to do new tech implementation, our CMO, Carrie Palin, said it really well early on in our journey, is we're going to pick a few great horses that we're really confident in, and we're going to ride them to the finish. So we've tried to be very focused in our stack and what we actually put in here and how it all weaves together. And we've also been very diligent in taking out pieces that we've decided is actually adding noise or we're not realizing the value from. And one of the things that I would point out here on the stack slide isn't the number of pieces of tech, but the way that we've also tried to divide how we actually build out our tech stack, which is we're allowed to put in a lot more complexity in our core, all of our data systems, the insights, the actual operational backend, where we know that our marketing operations teams are able to spend the time and focus really on maintaining these pieces and getting the most out of them. But when we actually go to look over on our executional side, we try to make very focused bets and giving our teams just the tools that they really need to be effective and not overloading them, and then making sure that that core system actually connects through to all of their endpoints and enables them to really be effective in their execution. Their day-to-day isn't supposed to be about the tools and about the data. It's supposed to be about them going into the market and engaging with customers, and so we want to make sure that we've implemented a fabric that really does help them do that.
Hey, Jeff, we have a question, and you mentioned, you mentioned that you not only what you're selecting, but that you've taken some out. We have a question here that says sometimes tech gets purchased at a company without marketing operations knowing about it. It gets purchased by IT or some other group and has to be incorporated in. Did you have that problem, and were you able to get that to stop, or is that something you're still facing, and how are you addressing that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's actually a great question, and probably something to point out there is that always is going to happen. What we've done is we were very prescriptive about taking an assessment of everything we have, diving deep into how is it used, where is it used, what is it connected to, and taking out those pieces that other people had bought and telling them when it came up to renewal, we're not doing this, and actually starting to end of life tools, even if we were still paying for them, just simply to make sure that we weren't at a point where suddenly we would need to hold on to this confusing piece of tech. And then to help stop that sort of mass kind of stealth growth of Martech, we've actually tried to implement a process where it can't go through procurement and it will not get funded or be allowed to be signed off for if it's a piece of tech until it's gone through a full review cycle. So procurement knows that they have to come to some of the different business owners within marketing and actually validate that this is a piece of tech that we want. So it's really stopped a lot of the stealth tech from showing up. It still can occur sometimes, if it's a low budget tool or something like that, somebody's able to push the PO through pretty easily. But for the most part, a lot of the really big, gnarly pieces that were in there that were just creating confusion, we were able to clamp down our system enough that we actually are able to maintain visibility across everything that's potentially coming in. And our marketing team, as they started to see the value of this cleaner tech stack, they've actually picked up on the same processes and adopted and embraced it as well, where they'll now actually come to myself or to others in the org and say, hey, we're looking at this piece of tech. Can you help us evaluate it? And we actually act as a partner with them to understand, are we filling a long-term gap for them? Is this something that they really do need? Do we think we can see the ROI out of it before we go ahead and just buy it and throw it on top of the stack?
That's great. So, thanks.
No worries. With that in mind, I showed you the stack. We spoke a little bit about it, or the fabric, if you will. But really, let's try and boil this down a little bit more into a slightly more usable framework of thinking. The takeaways are pretty straightforward and probably nothing groundbreaking here or earth-shattering to all of us. But at the same time, it's always good to reorient ourselves around these kinds of questions. A really orchestrated and revenue-focused tech fabric really does have to start with a few key points. First of all, it really does need to be integrated. So spend the time making sure that your tools are connected, the data you're sharing across all of the different pieces of tools or tech, and that the insights are actually available across all of your customer touch points so that your marketers can be effective. Make sure that the stack you have is also focused and usable. Take out the excess, focus on the needs today and the needs for tomorrow, and then make sure that you're actually using these tools to the full extent. It doesn't have to be all at once, but make sure that you at least have a plan to implement all the different use cases for the tools you have. on the data front, making sure that it's connected and clean is really critical. Otherwise, too often your marketers wind up bogged down by your tools, or will just give up on the tool itself and go back to the old method. And we really don't want them living in spreadsheet hell anymore. So have to make sure that the data they have is accurate, usable, and actionable, so you can enable them to be informed and nimble when they actually go to market. And not just, by the way, your marketers anymore, but also think about that data and how it's now available and usable for your GTM partners and in the systems and tools that they may want to be using. And that's part of the key for revenue marketing focus, is making sure that your tools actually will work beyond just the marketing fabric. And finally, it's making sure that what you have is implemented right and strategic in your development. We've tried to really implement tools that our marketers will know how to use, will find value out of, and that they actually will use. And then we only add pieces, sort of to that question that we had earlier, we only add pieces where we see a real long-term gap or a need, and we've seen that the marketers actually have a true desire to bring this piece of tool tech in and want to bring it into their processes. And then we will spend the time to actually integrate it into their processes, into their workflow, and into our data system so that they actually can go to market with it. And obviously, once you've gone through all that, review your stack regularly. We try to do an annual full review of everything that we have, the ROI that we're seeing, the total cost of all of our stack, the potential growth of those costs, and identifying also what are the gaps that we want to address in the next year. And then quarter to quarter during our planning cycles, we'll actually reassess that roadmap and make sure that we actually have been driving towards the right vision. And if we see things change, we'll actually set up projects to dive in there and adjust our stack or clean our data or take something out. And just back to what Kate was saying, remember, folks, that it really isn't about how big your stack is or how cool it is or how many new cutting-edge pieces it has. It's really about bringing the tools and data that enable your marketers to do well. And if you're seeing that your marketers are succeeding and their output is growing, then you know that your stack is actually working. And that's the real key, I think, with the demand orchestration and revenue marketing focused stack, is just bringing that level of focus and organization and rigor to your stack.
Thanks, Jeff. I
Okay.
think that was, yeah, thanks. This is my fun slide. But I think just to your point about reviewing the tech regularly, I know from my standpoint, it tends to sort of be, oh, renewal time is coming. Do we still need this piece? I have to re-justify it or whatever. But what we lack a lot of times is looking at the holistic stack altogether and not just that individual piece that may be up for renewal. So I know that's a takeaway I'm going to take with me, to remember to plan these regular check-ins of the entire tech fabric and not just one piece as it comes up. So thank you for that. Technology, of course, won't solve all of your problems. We just talked a lot about it, but now we're going to move into why we need orchestration and what we mean by that, and why we think that that is important. So ultimately, what we mean by orchestration is just how you organize and connect not just your tech, but all of your processes, your people, and your data for success throughout the entire funnel, marketing as well as the rest of the funnel. So we refer to this as demand orchestration, and we just touched on this earlier, but really this means that marketing ops needs to take a shift from being an order taker to something more like an air traffic controller. So I'll let Jeff talk about how they made this shift at Box.
Awesome. Thanks, Kate. Yeah, and I'm excited to get to this part because I really do think that this is where the most change can be made. As I said, the tech stuff I don't feel like is groundbreaking, but how we actually operate as marketing strategy and operations functions is where we really can make an impact and drive the organization towards a revenue marketing focus, which really does require a new level of efficiency and coordination, and not just within marketing, but across the entire GTM organization. And so really we have to think about this sometimes as a little bit of a difficult reevaluation of the entire role of marketing ops. Oftentimes it does more and more just become sort of that order-taking function of, here are the list of projects marketing needs to address, or here are the current challenges we face, or the new pieces of tech we need to bring in, kind of a back-office project-oriented function. And really what I think we need to do more and more of in marketing is try to mimic what we see in our counterparts sometimes in sales ops and advanced sales organizations, where they really are more of a strategic and planning motion and really helping to align all the functions of sales to go and actually execute for their coming quarter or year. And that's where they get involved in things like territory planning or comp structure, really kind of the big high-level strategic stuff that helps orient the entire org. Marketing operations, we do some of this, but I think that we need to adopt a more strategic mindset in our execution model, and not just managing the tech or the tools. And I think the air traffic controller is a great metaphor for that. Marketing operations and the strategy and ops overlay really is a critical partner to the performance marketing vision or the revenue marketing vision. Not only do we provide the tools and data that marketing really needs to execute with, but we also are an organization that looks across the entirety of the system, looks across all of the functions, across all of the tools, all of the data, and we're able to see how all of the processes interact and interconnect, because it's our job to make sure that they all interconnect properly. And from that viewpoint, we're able to actually really start to think about how it all is supposed to work and how it can evolve to become a more effective total machine. Your marketers that are out there executing, they really do have to focus on their day-to-day execution operations. It's very hard for them to zoom out and not just see the big picture for their own function, but their big picture for the entire series of functions. And obviously, they are going to be your key partners as you try to drive the strategic vision. But marketing operations really does sit in that advantageous point to be the trusted advisor to all of marketing leadership and to help guide the overall vision and path for the evolution of your marketing org. And the reality is that we really do need to start to actually make this an imperative for marketing operations and marketing leaders, because with revenue marketing, we know that we're going to be asked to do more and more. And as Kate mentioned, the CMO's job just keeps getting more complicated. And the reality is that we aren't going to see the resources scale proportionally to those asks. So we need to become more coordinated, more efficient, more effective as a machine, and be able to then connect outwardly to all of our partner orgs to make sure that we're really helping drive that revenue engine.
Jeff, this sounds awesome, but it also sounds really overwhelming, especially for those of us who are swamped with the day-to-day order taking. So how do we do it?
Yeah, it's not going to be an easy one, and it is a journey. So to continue the box example, I'll walk through a few of these pieces. And really, we started that journey by setting a very clear vision of where we wanted to be in the next 3 years. We defined what revenue marketing was going to mean for us as an organization and what our performance marketing orientation really meant to the marketing functions. And then we laid out what each year would bring for us and where we need to start on that journey. That great slide that you shared, Kate. Actually, we brought an early version of that slide into some of our discussions and where we wanted to be. And really for us, it started with getting the demand engine right. Marketing is first and foremost still a pipeline and awareness engine. We need to always be hitting at 100% on those pieces before we can even start to think beyond marketing. So getting our mission right and the delivery of pipeline was still a core goal, and so we made sure that we did everything we could to fine-tune that engine, and obviously we're still on that journey, and it's never going to be done. We need to bring in more pipeline every quarter, and we need to be more efficient and adopt the newest motions to reach out to our customers and respond to our competitors and all that. We also then started to spend some time building our systems for the future. And that's what a lot of the pieces up here on this slide are about, is from an operational standpoint, we realized that we needed to address a lot of challenges we had today, but we need to be building systems that would support us at a far larger scale with a far more complex mission as we continue down our 3-year journey, knowing that today we might not be dealing with existing customers and upsell, cross-sell motions or accelerating opportunities, but we need to have systems that are ready and capable of handling that when our mission gets to that point. We really also started to think about how do we look beyond our walls. And when we were focusing even on just the demand engine alone, how do we make sure that we are really tightly connected with our GTM partners? And how do we bring in things like ABM, which is still really about that early stage pipeline development for us, or really understanding where our GTM partners are challenged and where marketing might be able to bring its systems and functions and unique skill sets and know-how to bear to help them. and then figuring out where in our journey would those motions kind of fit. So once we actually aligned a lot of that and just really set the vision, then it was a matter of just every quarter, every cycle executing on that plan and trying to check off, okay, well, we need to go and take care of this piece first, or this got held up. What are the other pieces that we need to bring in to help us advance this part of the mission? And that was really critical, building a cadence for alignment across our org and across our functions that not only looked at, again, the what do we have to do this quarter, but how are we doing against the strategy? How are we doing against the vision? And where do we need to adjust or course correct to achieve our big picture goals? And with that, I've also taken all of that I just mentioned and tried to boil it down again into a framework for this demand orchestration journey and what are some of the key things to start doing. And really, I think that the first part is about blending that strategic and operational focus. You're not going to be able to set yourself up for a big journey until you're able to zoom out a little bit and get your big picture kind of orientation right and start to add that strategic layer after an honest assessment of all of your functions and processes. So marketing operations leaders, marketing leaders out there, adopt that strategic mindset and really realize that you guys sit at the ideal intersection to look across the entirety of your organization and understand what's working, what's not working, and if I want to get to this point in our evolution, what needs to change long term. And really this will require the operations team to work beyond the order-taking approach and partner directly with your CMO and your other GTM leaders to understand how to build that vision and then how to help drive and orient everybody to that vision. Then once you have your vision, creating that strategic and then, the primary reinforcement points for your organizational alignment. And that really is all about your planning cycles. It's making sure that you have a big picture orienting yearly plan and you have a way to translate that into your quarterly plans with not just the right operational objectives, your budgets and targets, but also the right initiatives that you're going to take on as an organization as a whole and function by function to really move forward and make sure that you're getting everyone swimming in the same direction and every quarter nudging them back into line when they start to stray or if they're ready to take the next big step in their evolution, helping them to make it through that step. And finally, it's, remember and maintain your customer focus. Operations is at that intersection, and so it's imperative that you guys thoroughly understand the daily processes of your customers, the marketing functions, and that you are actually able to then drive their success because their success is your success. This means ensuring that your data and tools are properly orchestrated and helping them, but it also means that your projects that you're trying to drive are things that are going to help the whole system or help drive the big kind of stepwise function of an individual marketing team. And remember that while I'm saying we need to take on a more strategic mindset, understand that these marketing functions are, in fact, your partners. You aren't a strategic overlord in an ivory tower. We are, in fact, the operational team that's supporting these other teams and really helping to try and grease the rails so that they can get to the better spot for the overall revenue marketing vision. And finally, it's working across the GTM org. Look beyond the walls of just marketing and try to help make sure that you're enabling the partnerships with your other teams across the GTM engine. And at the same time, you guys as operational leaders are connecting with your operational counterparts, making sure that your data flows from your systems into their tools, their data is flowing back into yours, and everybody is able to start to think more holistically around where are the challenges to revenue recognition and how do we help accelerate and drive that entire engine forward. And that will allow you to really define the role that marketing will play within your GTM engine. And then build your stepwise pattern to figure out where are the right places for marketing to extend beyond the walls and have the right support systems there for it. So it's a lot, but again, taking it piece by piece is, I think, the most critical piece or the most critical starting point. And just keep in mind here that there's three major ultimate goals of sort of revenue marketing when we talk about what needs to be done to enable it. And you probably want to start with an honest assessment of your organization, your operations, and looking at these three different goals, go, where do I need to start as an organization to really effectively begin my journey? So with this in mind, looking at things like, is my process and operating model ready for this journey? Do I need to drive further alignment of marketing's internal processes to bring in pipeline and then support revenue creation and velocity. Your tools and your data. Do we have the right fabric built? Do we have too much in there? Do we need to focus it? Do we need to better align and integrate our data systems? Do we need to clean up our data? Are there major gaps in our stack that we do need to actually go bring in new tech to help fill? And not just thinking about today, but again, thinking about the big picture of where you're trying to get to and how does that connect not just within marketing, but outside of marketing's walls. And then, of course, obviously driving that pan-GTM focus, understanding that marketing doesn't operate in a vacuum and that the revenue journey is going to touch all of your GTM partners. So making sure that you have the right pathways into those organizations and the right partnerships established for marketing to make an impact beyond just pipeline. And to be honest, we certainly have not nailed this at Box yet, but I do like to think we're headed in the right direction. And we've been running very hard to try and deliver on this vision, and we've done pretty well in the last few years. But we still have a long way to go, so I'm just trying to share a few of my learnings from this fascinating journey. And hopefully it helps you to push your marketing into that next kind of step of revenue marketing. And I'm going to be excited to see some of the questions and thoughts that come up from this.
Thanks, Jeff. Really appreciate you giving us a window into how you evolved your role and how you helped evolve the organization at Box. So this has been very helpful for me. In conclusion here, marketing contributed revenue is already a mandate, and marketing ops is uniquely situated to have a clear path to the C-suite thanks to the access to the data, the technology, and the visibility across the organization that we're afforded in our seats in marketing ops. So, but in order to have that path to the C-suite, we have to think beyond automation. We have to think beyond tools and just checking off projects and really become leaders in orchestrating revenue creation. So journey slide is up here again. Figure out where you are on the journey. Figure out what you need to do to get the fundamentals right. And then make sure that your plan is an iterative process. So you're constantly improving upon your plan and adjusting and editing it as you get further along this journey and strive towards driving revenue. So we'll leave you with some takeaways in the ever popular do's and don'ts format. And first one is don't buy tech just for the sake of tech, even if it's really shiny and really cool looking. Do build an integrated stack that empowers the whole marketing team. Don't become just an order taker. Do adopt a strategic mindset for process improvement across the organization. And finally, don't plan marketing processes in a vacuum. Do plan for the entire revenue journey, not just the top of the funnel. So if you found this content helpful, as Jeff mentioned early on, you can visit the Integrate blog. We have a lot of similar content for marketing ops and demand marketers. If there's a specific challenge that you're looking to solve, you can feel free to message me directly. We'll help you find things that can help. And finally, just a little plug, Integrate is hiring and will be hiring marketers in the future. So if you know especially some fresh talent at a junior level that is looking for a marketing role, have them check out our careers page. So thank you very much. I think Jocelyn I saw some questions come in.
Yeah, so and I'd like to make sure anybody who has questions feels free to open those up as well. And thank you both so much. I love getting the opportunity to see tech stacks, and I always appreciate companies that are willing to share theirs and talk about why theirs are there. And so I do want to go into one question on tech stack that we got from Linda. She says, my CMO wants to cap our tech stack like Google, the way Google used to cap the word count on their homepage. So do you advise this? And if so, how would you pick the number for the cap?
So I'll go first. I think the spirit of putting limitations in place makes sense, but I find it really difficult to just draw a hard line like that in terms of a number. That seems to me really artificial. I'd rather see a more rigorous evaluation process in place. So Jeff outlined kind of what their process looks like, and how everyone has to, part of procurement is going through marketing ops, going through this rigorous process. I think I'd rather see something like that in place than just an artificial limitation of this is the number. Steph,
yeah, that makes sense.
Anything to add there?
That makes sense.
Yeah, I was definitely going to say, I think, your CMO is fair to say we want to stop the explosion of MarTech. Obviously, the budget is a great way to control that, and saying here's how much you have to buy toys and tools. Stop buying toys, buy more tools. But I do think, as Kate said, doing a fair evaluation of, hey, what are the capabilities we want to be able to do? Scoping out then with what tools do we think we can do that, and where does that fall within my budget envelope is a really good starting point. Number of tools is not going to be sort of a clear assessment because some tools are small, some tools are big. Every tool, then small or big, counts as one. But looking at, well, what are the capabilities that I can actually achieve within the budget given to me, and what are the gaps then that still remain, and what, given my budget, is the right level of support that our stack or our fabric should provide to the org, is probably the better conversation rather than just you're allowed to have 5. Now, then that said, they might say something on number of new tools that you're allowed to bring in a given period of time, and that might be a slightly more fair way to put a number and saying, hey, we can only support so many implementations in a given time period or absorb so many new functions. So let's make sure that we're being mindful on what we go and bring into the org at any given point in time or for a certain time period.
That makes a lot of sense. I'll add one thing too. When I was at Intel and also at a couple of previous companies, the last 3 companies I was at, we had some kind of a limit either on the tech stack count or agencies or something else. And what was great about that from a process perspective that is so important for marketing operations-minded people and operational excellence is it makes you not just add, it makes you look at having to, if you wanted to add something and your mindset is that so you need to cut something that's lower performing, it's an excellent mindset to get into. It's like going to the driving range, right, to make sure your game is good. It's putting that discipline in. And then if you really need to add a +1 to your stack, everything in there has been justified. And the other thing about it is it's excellent at aligning marketing and IT and purchasing so that there's a commonality. It's whether it's official or unofficial SLA, it's very effective and a great best practice that I found there. Yeah, and then we have another question from Robert from CA. Thank you, Robert. For building out an appropriate tech stack, are there cornerstone pieces that are needed before others? For example, automation platform before a customer record system?
I mean,
I would, yeah, you go. It totally depends on the organization.
Yeah, I would say probably the same. It depends on your size, your scale, your budget, and the asks that are being placed on your organization. But I do think obviously getting some of your critical pieces in place are just a must-do. Table stakes tech is going to be things like a clean, well set up marketing automation platform, a proper CRM system, getting those connected, having your web systems in place so that you can actually capture customers. Those are, I would assume, are sort of the base 3. After that, everything else is sort of the next nice to have, and there's probably different tiers depending on the needs on your organization. But getting the big 3 in place is probably the most critical piece, and making sure that it all connects and you're able to actually capture the data properly from those pieces and then push that data out. That's definitely the critical starting points. From there, I think that the next layer of nice to haves are either the tools that your executional teams really do need to be effective, a good webinar platform or a really solid piece of content creation tool sets for them. And then on the back end, just what are the insights that you really need from your customers? So 1 or 2 critical insights pieces, whether you really believe that that's intent-based data or it's just need to build out your database, so you need to have a good contact acquisition partner. Those would be sort of how I would probably think about tiering things. But again, as Kate said earlier, your tech stack is very personal to your own org. So outside of the big 3, assessing what you need is probably a very personal kind of journey that you should take with the rest of your marketing stakeholders. Kate, I don't know if you have some other thoughts there. I guess obviously it also depends on the scale. So.
Yeah, I think this is probably common when I show up to work at Integrate, or I think probably most people show up to organizations. You're typically already going to find a CRM, a marketing automation, and a website in place. It's 2018. I think majority of organizations have nailed those three, as Jeff said. Kind of the biggest, I think, two areas that we looked at right away beyond those was just, do we have the right analytics access, maybe not even tools, but access in place, and then how are we able to look at that so we know what we're actually getting out of things. And there's the possibility that could already come from your CRM or your marketing automation anyway. And then the other thing that we really looked for, and this is what Integrate solves for, is something that helps us automate our demand gen efforts. And there's inbound comes into a neat package into your marketing automation, but all that other stuff that we were doing to generate demand is like really hard, really manual, spreadsheets, error-prone, bad data, like all of those big scary words. And in order to scale the organization of Integrate size, at least, we needed either a ton of people or some technology to help automate that area of it. And so the Integrate software, and so sorry, pitch here now, but this was really an important part of our tech stack, but it helps us automate all the top funnel marketing, so the third-party demand gen, the social, display advertising, account-based marketing, events, all of that I'm able to do in the Integrate platform with less people than I would have needed. So that's kind of one of the really big benefits of taking a look at mapping out your tech stack and figuring out what your organization needs to grow next. For us, we needed more demand. So our next logical step was, how can we get tech that's going to automate the demand efforts?
Great. And there's a follow-up question on that. When do you when are you looking at your tech stack and adding projects and pilots serially versus in parallel? So, when are you looking at, like from the previous question, would you be working on automation platform and customer record system at the same time? Or do you think you should approach things serially? Or what is your advice for making that decision?
Well, I don't have the luxury to approach things serially, so I'm often integrating a lot of things all at once. And I think that's okay as long as you have the process in place and the right resources dedicated to it. That's my standpoint. I think there are definitely some things that make sense to have in place before other things come in place. So, for example, Marketo is our marketing automation. We wouldn't implement tech that integrates with our marketing automation before our marketing automation was ready for that tech to be integrated. So there's definitely some things that you want to have in certain orders, but I think if you have the resources and the right people to own the implementation and adoption of the tech, I see no problem with doing multiple implementations at once, but it's going to really depend on the size of your org.
Yeah, I think, not just to Kate's point, it's bandwidth, but it's also, as your org scales, tech implementation becomes more complicated, and so sometimes you can only do so much before they start to weigh each other down. So I definitely would go back to you need to have a good planning process, first of all, and understand what you can support, and then to Kate's point, what is the critical path of some of those pieces of tech. So, for example, we'll sometimes we'll dedicate bandwidth to making existing tech better, or updating things, or spending time, on some of that maintenance or sustain motions, and that will mean that we don't have bandwidth for as many parallel tech implementations. But also sometimes, as your organization becomes larger, a single, large tech project might take up most of your bandwidth on your team to make sure that it is done right and that it is, properly connected. So it really is going to be a bandwidth question and the size of the tech that you're implementing. Some things are easier to do in parallel than others. So definitely, I think, there's probably not going to be a clear answer to it, but understanding what your capacity is, what's your org's focus in a given quarter or half or year, and then how do you stagger those implementations, is always kind of, the planning piece is going to be the most important part to help you guide what you can do concurrently versus what has to be in a serial order.
Okay, that's great.
And Jocelyn, I don't
There's
know
a
if you
related question here. Yeah. No, I think you covered that very well. There's a follow-on to that. If you have a small organization, it says, and we only have 1 to 2 marketing operations people who are already overwhelmed, what do you suggest we focus on first? You kind of touched on some of that of priorities, but the follow-up on this is, how do you, when you have a small team of marketing ops, how do you prevent them from just being tactical and focusing on things that keep the lights on, quote, keep the lights on, end quote, versus, so making sure that you're still staying strategic and forward-looking. How do you get out of that cycle of just being, supporting and just doing the maintenance?
I'll defer to Kate on that one for sure, because I think that's something she's an expert on.
Well, it's hard, especially when people are relying on you to do that implementation pieces that you committed to and managing the tech. I think what I did and what we regularly do is we have a map like the one that's up on the screen here. It's a lot more squiggly lines, a lot more complicated, but we created a map so that we know what everything does, and we actually added on to this. So each of these logos that you would see, this is obviously Jeff's, not mine, but my version, in addition to the logos, I just have a sentence or two of kind of what that technology does, or a couple bullets under each of those pieces of text, so that anybody can quickly glance at it and say, if somebody comes to me and says, oh, we need a solution for XYZ, then I can say, all right, pull up the tech stack. What do we have here that potentially could already solve it? And we'll look through there. And so that's one way that I'll kind of prioritize the, hey, can you look at this new cool tool? Or, hey, we really need to solve for this. Having the data organized, showing how it fits into all the other processes and systems, and clearly knowing what it does, I think has made it a lot easier for our organization to say, pause, what's important, and focus on what's really the next critical thing for our organization to focus on.
Great, thanks. I'll add one thing. I've heard from a couple CMOs recently in 2 different, exec forums, so it was not one conversation. There were 2 distinct conversations of people saying, they've had to choose to just stop doing things. And if nobody notices, they just let them go away. So a lot of the maintenance of stuff can often be legacy. And I thought, that's certainly something that you wouldn't want to do as a marketing operations individual without the buy-in from above you. But there's a lot of maintenance type projects and programs in marketing organizations that the marketing operations get saddled with. And sometimes evaluating the lower performing ones and just saying, well, let's just stop doing this and see if anybody notices. And this one particular CMO said he freed up 25% of his marketing ops team. They just stopped doing things that they've been doing for 8 years, 10 years. And they also heard a couple people say their best practice is they always have one flagship project that they're doing. The marketing operations is doing that's strategic in nature and long-term and high value that gets reported out on, so that marketing operations does not become the marketing automation implementation team or maintenance team, that it stays as the strategic arm. And I've found those to be sound pieces of advice. So that's great.
Yeah, Jocelyn, I think
so I know we're getting close
point,
to the top here. Yes, I just wanted to ask if you guys had any final words.
I was just going to say, quickly to what you were saying is I think that how much you enable your marketers to also self-serve, and the tools that they have are the tools that they need and the tools that they can use, helps take some of that burden off of your team as well. And then obviously doing a assessment of what is it that my operations team does. Is there a cleanup project that I should be doing instead of, some new whiz-bang tech this quarter, so that I can free up those resources going forward? clean out my database once and we know we don't have to do all this database maintenance anymore for a while, or eliminate these processes that we no longer really need. Every so often, sort of that navel gazing can be a very valuable effort to free up resources to allow you to focus on your other projects. And again, how you plan for it and where you actually dedicate your bandwidth and resources is critical to figuring out when and where can you do that, and then how do you then move forward with the new bandwidth or capacity you've freed up.
That's great. Thank you. And I'm just going to jump into our slide 23 right now. I'd like to say a big thank you to you, Jeff, for sharing your insights, sharing your tech stack, giving us some great takeaways, and working with Kate on some great do's and don'ts. And Kate, I really want to thank you because it's so great to hear from heads of marketing demand who are within the platforms that we all as marketers and marketing operations practitioners are evaluating and using, and getting to hear how you're drinking your own champagne is great, and what you're doing to bring the excellence of demand orchestration into a demand orchestration company is always insightful. So thank you for that. Thank you personally for your participation. And I'd also like to double down with a thank you to Kate and the entire Integrate team for being a sponsor of MOCCA. MOCCA is a 503c nonprofit. We're here just to help advance the profession of marketing operations and advance operational excellence in marketing through thought leadership and sharing of best practices. We would not be around without the generosity of our sponsors. So thank you to Integrate for sponsoring us. And the programs that you see on this page are what we offer on an annual basis, and membership is free. You can join us by going to joinmocca.com and sign up. We have newsletters, user groups, and we are particularly right now focused on live events in Silicon Valley, Boston, DC, and New York areas, and there are a few other areas interested in having MOCCA events there that we're talking to people there. Feel free to get in touch with us. You can get in touch with me and around webinars, Cecile Thurian, who would normally be hosting today and help set up today, but is on a flight back from Europe, so could not join us today. You feel free to reach out to her. We're all the board members are listed on our website. Feel free to reach out to any of us. And one of the things you get by signing up is not only do you get some of the information that we put out, including some annual surveys by leading research firms that are unique to the MOCCA community and marketing operations practitioners, but we also offer member-only discounts to industry conferences and events. We're able to get codes to help give discounts to the major events that we all care about. And up next, we have our upcoming event in New York City, and Scott Brinker, who is famous for the Martech landscape infographic, and is also on the MOCCA advisory board, will be presenting, and we'd love to have you join us, as well as the CMO of Marketo, Sarah, will be presenting, and they're both really great speakers. So they'll be there. We'll also be putting takeaways from their presentation out into our newsletter as well. We'll also be sending today's webinar recorded link and the slides out to everybody so you can get it. So I want to thank everybody for attending today, and if you're listening to this later, as half or more of our viewers do, we really want to thank you and make sure you've gotten the slides and downloads and the links to things like the Integrate blog that Jeff has relied on and that I really enjoy reading, as well as many, many others. So just a big thank you to everybody, and I look forward to seeing you at a live MOCCA event or joining us on our next webinar. Thanks, everyone.